Near the edge of Maplewood Village, a quiet suburban neighborhood in the United States, stood an old stone church called Grace of Faith Chapel. Built decades ago, its arched doors and stained glass windows gave it a timeless aura. Generations of families in Maplewood Village had come here to worship, celebrate weddings, or mourn lost loved ones. Despite its age, the church had adapted to modern requirements, adding a small ramp by the main entry to accommodate seniors and wheelchair users. Over time, that ramp proved essential for older parishioners and visitors with mobility challenges. During Sunday services, you'd see them gliding gently up the slope, greeting friends at the top. A short handrail provided stability. Though it wasn't a large or fancy structure, the ramp symbolized the church's welcoming spirit. No one ever questioned its presence. Yet Maplewood Village also had a homeowners association that oversaw local property standards, even for a centuries-old church that technically lay within the HOA boundaries. And on that HOA board served a certain middle-aged woman with a fierce sense of personal authority, Nadia Beaumont. However, nearly every neighbor called her Karen behind her back, comparing her attitude to the infamous Karen stereotype, condescending, quick to anger, perpetually outraged at minor issues. Nadia, Karen, frequently lectured about property aesthetics and uniform standards. She once cited the church's yard for unapproved fence color, though no fence existed, only a short stone wall from decades prior. That complaint was dismissed. Undeterred, Nadia's fixation soon shifted to the church's ramp. In her eyes, it marred the historic facade. She believed ramps should be hidden or non-existent. She privately sneered at modern intrusions, overshadowing her vision of a pristine, old-style Maplewood. Still, the ramp had official approval. The pastor, Reverend Curtis, brushed off Nadia's past remarks, calmly stating that the ramp was both lawful and morally crucial for accessibility. For a while, Nadia merely glared at the ramp each time she passed. Eventually, though, her distaste festered, coalescing into a plan for sabotage. If she couldn't eliminate the ramp through HOA citations, she might find a more insidious route. Nadia's frustrations simmered for months. She repeatedly tried to challenge the ramp in petty ways, claiming the church's drainage was subpar, that water might pool near the ramp's base and create slick surfaces. The church had an adequate gutter and drainage system, plus a graded drain near the ramp's edge leading to an underground channel. That drain ensured rainwater wouldn't accumulate. So her official complaints fell flat. The city had inspected the ramp and found it compliant. But Nadia, unyielding in her desire to remove the ramp, seized on that mention of drainage. If she could cause a serious flood or water damage, perhaps the church would consider removing or heavily modifying the ramp. Maybe they'd revert to the original steps or face major repairs. She fantasized that the pastor might close the ramp to avoid liability. A vile plan sprouted in her mind. Sabotage the drain so it clogs and floods the entrance. The question was how. She needed something absorbent, easy to wedge in place, potentially expanding when wet to block water flow. Some material that wouldn't obviously appear like an external item. Strange as it seemed, Nadia concluded that feminine hygiene products, like tampons, could do the trick. They expanded in water, creating a dense plug. If stuffed deep inside the drain, water would overflow, drenching the area around the ramp. It was extreme, yes, but in Nadia's twisted logic, this was for the greater good of aesthetic purity. She told herself she was protecting Maplewood's character. She had no moral qualms about meddling with the church. She quietly stocked up on boxes of tampons, ready for deployment at the next heavy rain forecast. Late April arrived, bringing the region's first major spring storm. Meteorologists predicted a steady downpour overnight, lasting into the morning. Nadia realized this was her moment. If she clogged the drain just before the rain, water would have hours to accumulate, saturate the ramp area, and potentially cause real damage. She felt a surge of adrenaline at the thought of finally toppling that eyesore. That evening, under the cover of gathering clouds, Nadia drove to the church's lot. Most staff had gone home. The building was locked, lights off. She parked discreetly near a side street, carrying a small bag with tampons. Heart pounding, she crept toward the ramp. The overhead lamppost cast a dim glow, enough for her to see the drain's narrow grate. She knelt, prying the grate up, just enough to access the pipe. Then, with quick, nervous motions, she shoved handfuls of tampons down, pressing them into the pipe's opening. The paper and cotton lumps jammed inside. Once satisfied, she replaced the grate, making sure the sabotage wasn't visible from a casual glance. She scurried back to her car, mind racing with anxious excitement. The first droplets of rain pelted the windshield as she drove away. "That ramp's going to be underwater tomorrow," she muttered, half smiling. Sure enough, overnight rains pounded Maplewood Village. By dawn, water trickled steadily off the church roof, flowing toward the ramp's drain. Normally, the water would swirl down the pipe. But with the drain jammed, the water had nowhere to go. Slowly, a large puddle formed, creeping up the ramp's slope. By 6 a.m., the base of the ramp was submerged in a small flood, water seeping into the adjacent walkway. Reverend Curtis arrived at 7 a.m., intending to open the church for morning prayers. He stepped out of his car into an inch-deep puddle, alarmed. The ramp, half floating in water, looked precarious. Fearing damage, he hurried inside to fetch a mop and caution signs. But the mop was useless against the rising water. He realized the drain must be blocked. Summoning the church's caretaker, Henry, they attempted to clear the grate. After removing surface debris, they saw it was jammed from below. Henry tried a plumbing snake, but the tampons inside had swelled, forming a thick plug. Water kept spilling over, flooding the ramp. Meanwhile, the rain continued. They needed a professional drain service or risk further damage. Parishioners arriving for morning prayers had to wade through ankle-deep water around the side entrance. Some older folks who used the ramp found it impassable, forced to navigate the slick steps. The pastor worried about liability if someone slipped. He roped off the ramp, apologizing to those who depended on it. Concerned phone calls went out to a local plumber. By midday, the rain eased, but the ramp remained flooded. A plumber arrived, pried open the drain pipe, and discovered the culprit, a soggy mass of tampons lodged deep. The plumber's eyebrows rose in astonishment. This wasn't an accident. Someone had deliberately stuffed them. He cleared the clog with a specialized auger, letting the water drain at last. But by then, the wooden platform under the ramp had soaked up water, warping in places. Henry the caretaker and the Reverend took stock of the damage. Portions of the ramp's underside might need replacing if mold set in. The substructure might require thorough drying or reinforcement. Furious, Reverend Curtis recognized this was sabotage. The question, who would do such a thing to a church? Word spread among parishioners. Many were stunned. They recalled that the HOA had once complained about the ramp's design, but never stooped to sabotage. Yet a few folks whispered that HOA Karen had always despised the ramp, calling it an ugly addition. Could she be behind this? Without direct proof, the church staff kept speculation quiet. They focused on repairs, uncertain how to proceed. But the fiasco forced them to rethink the ramp. If their standard drainage could be so easily compromised, maybe they needed a more advanced approach. Perhaps, in a twist of adversity, they could upgrade the entire entry to resist future flooding. The idea sparked as they surveyed the soaked structure. Why not rebuild better than before? Sunday arrived, and many congregants found the ramp still roped off, though the water had receded. Some used the steps, others got help from friends to ascend carefully. Everyone buzzed about the sabotage rumors. Meanwhile, Nadia strolled into the church service later that morning, wearing a polite smile as though she'd done nothing. She rarely attended worship, but occasionally appeared to keep up social appearances. Reverend Curtis recognized her, suspecting she might be the culprit. But he had no proof. She greeted him with superficial warmth. What a pity about the ramp flooding. Perhaps the church should reconsider keeping it. If it's prone to water damage, it might be safer to remove it entirely. Her eyes flickered with feigned innocence. The pastor forced a calm reply. We're assessing solutions. We want it to remain accessible. Maybe we'll rebuild in a more resilient design. Nadia's lips thinned in disappointment. She realized the pastor wasn't entertaining removal. Later that week, the church's situation made its way to the next HOA meeting. Some residents had heard about the sabotage and the ramp's damage. They demanded the board investigate. If sabotage was linked to an HOA member, the consequences should be severe. Even though Nadia was on the board, suspicion circulated. She feigned ignorance, suggesting the church's own poor drainage planning caused the flood. One board member, Carlos Epps, seemed unconvinced. A mass of tampons stuffed into a drain isn't poor planning. It's sabotage, he said pointedly. Nadia shrugged, disclaiming knowledge. The board resolved to condemn vandalism, but took no direct action, lacking evidence. The church was left to handle repairs alone. Frustrated, the congregation decided they needed a broader approach, especially if sabotage recurred. Their old ramp design was vulnerable to cutting blockages. The caretaker, Henry, suggested a higher platform with integrated flood channels. The pastor liked the concept, but the cost might be steep. The congregation resolved to fundraise, determined to create a flood-resistant entry that no sabotage could hamper. As the church staff and congregation deliberated ramp repairs, Henry discovered a local architectural firm, Blueprint Innovations, that specialized in storm-resilient construction. He set up a meeting with Mia Delgado, a designer who was excited by the challenge. "We can do more than fix a ramp. We can transform your entire entry area into a raised platform with advanced drainage underneath." At a brainstorming session with the pastor and church elders, Mia sketched a concept, a gently sloped, wide walkway bridging from the driveway to the front doors, set on sturdy pillars. Underneath, a hidden drainage system fed multiple outlets. Any attempt to clog one line would be bypassed by backups. They could even incorporate removable flood panels on the sides. In heavy rains, water would flow harmlessly out, preventing any accumulation. Reverend Curtis marveled at the design, but worried about costs. Mia explained that while it wasn't cheap, it would be a lasting solution. The church could hold a fundraiser, apply for grants, or seek community donations. The congregation, outraged by the sabotage, felt motivated to support something robust that could not be easily sabotaged again. Enthusiastic momentum built. Younger parishioners launched a Raise Our Ramp campaign online, sharing the sabotage story. Sympathy and donations trickled in from near and far. The local newspaper covered it, labeling it a "Church Fights Back Against Sabotage with Innovation." The coverage garnered more interest, fueling the dream of a next-generation, flood-resistant entry. Meanwhile, Nadia seethed. She read about the church's big upgrade plans, realizing her tampons fiasco had spurred a bigger, better ramp project. The opposite of what she wanted. She considered interfering again, but the church was now vigilant. With so many supporters and watchers, further sabotage risked detection. She grudgingly stepped back, hoping the project might fail on its own or cost too much. Throughout summer, the church dedicated itself to raising the tens of thousands needed to build the advanced ramp. They hosted bake sales, rummage sales, and benefit concerts. Congregants donated generously. Mia Delgado's firm offered a partial discount, moved by the cause. A philanthropic foundation, hearing about the sabotage, pitched in a sizable grant. The local construction supply store pledged materials at cost. Still, costs remained daunting. The ramp would require specialized structural beams, multiple drains, and an overlay that matched the church's historic aesthetic. Volunteers pitched in labor to reduce expenses, but certain tasks needed professionals. Nadia watched from the sidelines, occasionally tossing barbs. "That fancy ramp is overkill. Why not fix the old one cheaply?" But the pastor calmly explained they wanted a permanent solution that would stand for decades. If sabotage or heavy storms struck again, the ramp would remain unscathed. By late August, the church was only a few $1,000s short of the final budget. They planned a last big push, a ramp rising gala in the church hall, featuring dinner, music, and a silent auction. Meanwhile, tensions simmered. The congregation still suspected an HOA board member had caused the original flood. Some demanded an official investigation. But lacking evidence, the matter stayed unresolved. As construction on the new ramp was about to begin, piles of materials arriving in the churchyard, Nadia felt cornered. She dreaded seeing a grand ramp overshadow the church facade she considered so charming. More so, she hated that her sabotage inadvertently fueled sympathy and money for the project. Her vanity insisted she try one last tactic. A week before the ramp construction started, Nadia approached the local building inspector's office, claiming the church's proposed design violated some municipal codes. She alleged the ramp's raised platform might encroach on the sidewalk or hamper fire lanes. She pored over city ordinances, searching for any possible technicality. However, Mia Delgado, the architect, had meticulously followed the city's guidelines. The design had already been submitted for official review, receiving preliminary approval. The city inspector politely told Nadia that the plan was code-compliant. Furious, she left empty-handed. Next, Nadia tried stirring fear among neighbors, claiming the raised platform would cause water redirection, flooding their yards. But the church's new drainage layout was designed precisely to channel water safely away. Her rumor campaign found little traction. The more she ranted, the more neighbors realized she was the likely saboteur in the first place. Finally, Nadia concluded she had no further recourse. The church, well supported, was unstoppable. She quietly retreated, planning to watch from afar, hoping the project might face unexpected problems. Meanwhile, the congregation remained vigilant, locking up materials each night to deter theft or further sabotage attempts. Early one bright September morning, trucks rumbled onto the church property, unloading steel beams, lumber, and drainage pipes. Mia Delgado and her crew surveyed the site, measuring carefully. Volunteers from the congregation donned work gloves to assist with simpler tasks, clearing debris, handing tools. The old ramp, water damage from the sabotage, was torn down, revealing a foundation needing reinforcement. Under Mia's direction, the builders erected a robust substructure. Steel columns anchored the new walkway slightly higher than the old ramp, ensuring that in heavy rains, water would run underneath instead of pooling on top. They installed multiple drain lines leading to external channels, each with protective grates that couldn't easily be sabotaged. Tiled flood panels were fitted along the edges, sealing the walkway's sides. If an attempt was made to clog one line, water would divert through another. As the shape took form, the structure looked imposing yet elegant, matching the church's stone architecture while showcasing modern engineering. The walkway was wide enough for wheelchairs or strollers. Handrails lined both sides. In deference to the church's heritage, decorative stone veneer along the ramp's sides blended seamlessly with the main building. Neighbors walking by marveled at the sophisticated design. Some commented that it resembled a fortress ramp, defying any future sabotage. The pastor joked that if a biblical flood came, this ramp might still stand. Workers toiled for weeks, carefully finishing details, sealing surfaces, testing drainage with hoses. The final result was a testament to resilience, ironically made possible by one malicious act. Throughout the construction, Nadia tried to avoid passing the church, resentful at each stage of progress. But one evening, she decided to circle by, curiosity gnawing at her. Under dusk's fading light, she observed the nearly complete ramp, sleek, raised, with multiple drains. A sense of defeat washed over her. Her sabotage had led to a stronger outcome than the original. She recalled her frustration with modern additions messing up the church's facade. Yet, from a distance, she had to admit the new structure was not an eyesore. The stone veneer matched seamlessly, and the raised walkway gave the entrance a dignified look. Perhaps more galling was that the solution was sabotage-proof. No more easy clogs or tampons. Nadia felt a pang of guilt. She realized how petty and cruel it had been to sabotage accessibility for older and disabled parishioners. She'd only wanted to preserve her aesthetic ideals, but those people needed the ramp. Now, they had a better one. She suppressed the thought, rationalizing it was too big, too fancy. Yet, deep down, she recognized she'd lost the moral argument. October arrived, and the congregation announced a ramp dedication Sunday, inviting all to see the finished structure. The rumor circulated that a local news station might cover the event, highlighting the triumph over sabotage. On the chosen morning, a golden autumn sun lit the church's facade. Worshippers gathered at the new ramp's base, where Reverend Curtis stood with Mia Delgado, Henry the caretaker, and a handful of volunteer construction workers who'd contributed. Amid cameras flashing, Reverend Curtis spoke about adversity turning into renewal. Without mentioning Nadia by name, he referenced the sabotage that had spurred them to build something stronger. "We faced water that tried to drown our spirit," he said. "But with faith, community, and hard work, we rose higher, literally and figuratively." Applause rang out. Mia Delgado described the ramp's features: the integrated flood panels, the multiple drains that made clogging nigh impossible, the stable steel foundation. A ribbon was stretched across the ramp's entrance. An elderly wheelchair user, Miss Harriet Green, took a pair of scissors offered by Henry. She cut the ribbon, beaming as watchers cheered. Harriet then rolled up the ramp, flanked by joyous onlookers. The local news reporter interviewed Harriet, who praised the ramp's smoothness and dryness underfoot. Another interview captured the pastor's gratitude for the outpouring of support. The story of sabotage overcame adversity resonated with viewers. In the crowd, Nadia lingered at the back, unrecognized by many. She heard the spontaneous chanting of gratitude for the anonymous saboteur, whose actions ironically led to this wondrous upgrade. It stung her conscience. She realized the entire community, including the HOA board, admired the new ramp's design. Her attempts to degrade the church's entry had not only failed but sparked admiration for the final product. A few days after the dedication, Nadia mustered courage to speak privately with Reverend Curtis. She found him in the church office, tidying leftover materials. She claimed to be checking neighborhood compliance, but in truth sought closure. She cleared her throat awkwardly. "Pastor, quite a ramp you've got now. Very elaborate." He studied her, suspecting her role in the sabotage but lacking proof. "Yes, we're grateful. It should remain safe from future mischief." His tone was calm yet pointed. Nadia hesitated. She almost confessed her guilt, but chickened out. Instead, she murmured, "I hope it stands the test of time, and that your congregation remains safe." He gave a guarded nod. "Thank you for your concern. We appreciate any well wishes." Nadia forced a tight smile, left the church feeling no real relief. Her penance might be living with the knowledge that her wrongdoing ultimately boosted the church. Perhaps that was justice enough. Winter descended on Maplewood Village. The new ramp's drainage system handled snowmelt effortlessly. No matter the precipitation, water never pooled near the entrance. Parishioners, especially those older or disabled, praised how easy it was to access the building. Attendance even rose slightly, some drawn by curiosity about the flood-proof ramp, others moved by the church's welcoming improvements. The broader community recognized the ramp as a minor local marvel. "If you sabotage us, we'll build back stronger," people joked. The negativity surrounding the Tampons sabotage faded into rumor. Officially, the police or city never pursued charges, lacking direct evidence. Unofficially, many guessed Nadia was behind it. She kept her HOA seat, but lost respect among neighbors. Over time, her influence waned. People saw her fussing as a mild nuisance, overshadowed by the church's perseverance. Life in Maplewood Village continued. The old stone church stood proud, now graced by a sleek, modern walkway that combined heritage with forward-thinking resilience. On rainy days, water cascaded down discreet channels. No floods, no slick hazards, no sabotage possible. The congregation found comfort in that symbolic triumph. From one malicious act, they had forged a state-of-the-art entry that defied petty sabotage. Epilogue moments. Harriet smiling as she easily rolls up the ramp with groceries for a church food drive. Henry and Mia concluding final checks on the drainage system. Reverend Curtis reading thank you notes from an elderly member who no longer fears stepping on puddles. And in the background, a certain Karen, subdued, glimpsing that sometimes adversity yields new blessings. In the end, the sabotage ironically led to a top-tier ramp upgrade, flood-resistant, tamper-proof, and admired by the HOA itself. Maplewood Village's entire spirit rose above pettiness, proving that community, faith, and innovation can turn even the darkest sabotage into a shining testament of resilience.